Yeah. Okay, so this is Caleb. Those of you who follow me online know a little bit about his story. He came to me about, when was it made? 9 months ago? Yeah, 9 months ago. His owner passed in a tragic accident, and he had more than a few problems. He has a history of neglect before his previous owner, so he's sort of been neglected from the very beginning, and we suspect that he was inbred. I suspect he might have a disability or developmental disability, either relating to being inbred or subsequent trauma, but he had a lot of behavioural problems, so he was difficult to trim. I was told, correct me if I'm wrong, anyone who knows his previous life, but I was told that he was in a bridle, shanked bit, held when he was with the farrier. So for 9 months I've been slowly working on our trust and getting his leg handling to the point that I can kind of trim him with his cooperation and with his social engagement rather than him fighting me. So we're sort of at that place now, and it's really important because his front hooves in particularly are a disaster. His back hooves actually are some of the nicest hooves I've ever seen. They're more or less self-maintaining. They self-trim and they're like really balanced and strong. So his hind feet are really good, thank God for that. But his front hooves are terrible. And what we've got with the front hooves is severe mediolateral imbalance. So in human podiatry terms, we would call him supinated, meaning he bears his weight on the outside of his foot. And I think he always has, and this has caused some growth pathologies in his hooves. Prior to him coming to me, partly it was my fault because there was a miscommunication, but just before he came to me, he missed a farrier appointment. So he went 12 weeks without hoof attention just before he came to me. Make sure you don't touch the fence there, Sana. You're a little bit close. So when he came to me, we had very serious situation like this. I don't have photos of it. I could try and find it. My friend might have photos, but I didn't take photos because we were too busy managing your behavioural issues, weren't we? So what happened is that his frog had completely medially deviated. So the frog should be in the center of the sole, and his frog had moved over into the medial third of his sole. And this is very difficult to correct. It's a very slow process to bring it back into alignment. I did have radiographs done on his feet, and if I'm editing this video properly now, then we can have a look at those radiographs now on the edits. So the radiographs I had done to check to see the position of his coffin bone. I wanted to make sure there was no laminitis, no navicular issues, no rotation. He did have thin soles, and the vet gave me some good advice about reading his heel height, which I'll explain to you in a moment. But despite being mediolaterally imbalanced, his coffin bone was actually on a parallel ground alignment. So all of this is hoof horn distortion, and the coffin bone has found its different placement inside the hoof capsule. This is actually harder to fix because in order to bring the hoof horn back into balance, for a trim cycle, you have to slightly unbalance the coffin bone. Say if he's on this side with his hoof horn, but his coffin bone is like this. In order to bring his hoof horn back to this, I have to bring his coffin bone for a little bit like this. So I'm sort of deliberately doing micro counterbalances of his coffin bone. And when I do this, there is no riding, there is no training outside of a walk. Mostly he's in the paddock paradise. So when you're doing this with a hoof, do not ride or give them weight-bearing exercise when you're doing this with their hoof. So I'm sort of almost done with his front left. If you come over, I'll give you a look. If you kind of crouch down and move the camera around this hoof, this one's a little bit worse, you can really see that distortion. It's already much better, but it's a very slow process to correct it. And in a moment, I'll lift up that hoof and show you what the frog looks like. if you move the camera all around, if you can, he's perfectly safe. I've got him. Yeah, you can really see that. Nice. So let's have a look at the one I'm almost finished with the trim here, front left. If you bring the camera to a front-on angle, you can see the distortion. You can see he's got less material here and more material here, but I've brought it back into alignment, and I'm trying to get him to use the inside of his hoof more. This is a great situation where surefoot pads or composite foam style autonomous therapy can be really useful. And I'll give you some links in this video as well to sort of research and explore that. But let's pick up the hoof and I'll show you what that looks like. So almost done. Bring him round, bring the camera around. So I'm sort of trimming him sort of at liberty. I've got a lead rope just to direct him if I need to, but mostly he's being a really good citizen. So for 6 months, I didn't trim his bars at all. I left the bars exactly where they are because the bars were sort of impacted inside a very flat sole and he wasn't ready to have them trimmed. We have some separation here between the white line and the wall because I'm deliberately leaving this quarter long to kind of shore up this side of the hoof and to get him to use the inside more. So of course there's more pressure here than what there should be, but it's a deliberate choice I've made, and I'm sacrificing a bit of line connection there, white line connection. It's a deliberate choice I've made in order to get him to bring his balance more to the inside of the hoof. And just before I finish, I'm going to correct that a little bit. Today's the first time I've trimmed his frogs, and I just trimmed them here and here. And we are keeping the hooves as clean as we can. Okay, and we're starting to get some sole concavity back. But with these types of hooves, you really have to focus on correcting it from the heel, not from the toe. It would be really tempting to trim off the toes to balance the hoof, but I'm correcting this hoof from the heel. So I'm gonna finish this trim here. Caleb, you're doing really good, my friend. Okay. Well done. Oh, come on, mate. Well done. All right. So I'm going to do some open heel on this buttress. I'm very aggressive with this here because we need to, and his hoof will rest at least 4 weeks after this trim. And I want to get really nice, even, balanced heel platform here. From there, I'm gonna do a bit of perimeter rasp there, where again, trying to get him to weight the medial quarters and now bevel, almost like quarter relief here. Again, I'm leaving the toes alone because he's very thin soled, close to the toe. So I don't want to mess with that too much. And now I'm just kind of blending everything there, giving him a bit of a Mustang roll, flip the rasp, finishing backwards there, heel bevel, finishing backwards. So when he came, his frog was here. Okay, so the apex of the frog was approximately there. It's now sort of coming into the center. But again, that's a 9-month process as it is already. And we have probably 2 or 3 years more, and this horse is 19. So how many years has he had this problem? And the fact that we have any change in 9 months after, what, how many years of this problem? Because for sure, when he came to me, he had 3 months no hoof care. This type of frog deviation doesn't happen in 3 months. You don't get the frog moving to one side of the hoof in a 3-month process. And if you do, the horse is maybe laminitic or there's something internally going on. He was overweight, but he wasn't laminitic. This type of frog deviation takes years. Okay, so these are sort of the clues as a hoof care provider that you can pick up on and kind of look at these problems and say, was this a short-term problem? When did this problem potentially start? and based on that you can kind of gauge how long it's going to take to fix it. But this can put a lot of pressure on the hoof care provider and a lot of pressure on the owner. Sadly, because of the nature of the owner's passing of this horse, I don't know so much about his history because there is no information. I've had long conversations with her friends, but still there's not much we know. I would like to reach out to his previous farrier and ask what they were doing, and surely they were trying to bring the frogs back into position too. But you know, here I am with a puzzle and I'm trying to put all the pieces together. And it is important as a horse person and a hoof care provider to kind of look at these problems that the hooves or the horse is giving you and kind of say, was this a chronic problem? Did this happen over years, months, weeks? Or was this an acute problem and something that can be fixed pretty quickly? So he had acute problems with his behavior, like attacking and charging people when they were feeding him, and weaving at the gate, and he can still potentially weave at the gate sometimes if we get his arrangement and his triggers wrong. But the charging and the attacking has all gone away because that was an acute problem. It wasn't a chronic problem. He was doing it over a long period of time, and it was a pretty consistent problem he had, but in his mind, it was like a last resort that he was using for whatever reason. So we haven't had that with him, which is great, but now we're kind of working with chronic hoof problems. If you bring the camera back, just after those corrections I've made now on those heels, just look at the alignment of those two front hooves. The one that I've trimmed and the one that I haven't trimmed. If you just look, if you bring the camera, oh, he's going to move. I'm going to hold him real still. And if you bring the camera right smack bang in the middle of his chest, so we can get like there, perfect. Bring the camera into the middle of his chest and we can get a really good balanced look at how the angles, look at the angles of his bones and his center line of his hoof. His center line here is like there, and maybe this hoof isn't perfect yet, but I've managed to get a center line back on this hoof just with this trim. That doesn't change how he uses his body weight. He still uses his hoof the way he uses them, meaning he will consistently weight the outside of his hoof. But I can play with these corrections, and there's some really good science, because you have good science and bad science, right? In the year of 2020, we have learned there is good science and bad science. We have credible sources and non-credible sources. There's some very credible sources, peer-reviewed studies, very, very academic, very, very balanced and neutral perspective science about hoof gait analysis and mechanics of quadrupeds. So there were studies done on horses, hares, racing greyhounds, tetrapods, so crocodiles, and dogs, all quadrupeds. So we've got hooves and we've got paws and claws there. There was gait analysis studies, very good studies done on quadrupeds to discover what affects the hoof and the gait more. Does the hoof affect the hoof and change the way they use their body, or does the body affect the hoof? So it's about this question, where is the problem coming from? Is his ability, is his tendency to be supinated, is that coming from his hooves, or is this coming from his body? And what these studies found is that the evidence lent overwhelmingly for the body affecting the legs or the distal limb, the lower limb, more than the distal limb affecting the body. So if you've got this type of asymmetry, most likely it will be caused by something in his body. And if I turn him sideways, we're on a little bit of a hill here. He's looking at me like, what? You're doing real good, Mr. Caleb. So if we kind of stand there and try and get an anatomical sideways shot, so stand next to the water trough there. Yeah, and just get a really flat sideways shot. You can see we have, yeah, you're okay. We have rump high, meaning his hind legs, the bones in the hind legs are disproportionately long compared to the front. We have a downhill spine, so it's going like this, it's not flat or uphill. We have also a sunken spine, that is working together with a distended belly, which I think is something I'm working on with his diet, probiotics and better hay, more digestible fibers and more protein. And we have also a lot of tension here. See, when I touch his trapezius there, he kind of grips himself. He's also a little bit tense around people generally, but he's kind of gripping his spine here. He came with a saddle that was really poorly fitted, so it was bridging very, very much. And we have sort of really weird shoulder and scapula. He's got a gorgeous neck and a beautiful head, don't you? You're very adorable and you're very cute in kind of a backyard bred squiffy kind of way. But this science to say that hoof form and gait form is being affected by the body can be really, really well demonstrated in a horse with this kind of poor anatomical form. So when it comes for riding for him, in my personal opinion and my professional, non-professional opinion, meaning I tell the truth even if it's not the nice thing to say, is that he shouldn't be extensively ridden. Certainly not from someone of my body type and my weight. He should have in the region of 65 kilos tops on him, somewhere like this, and I weigh 72. So I have ridden him at a walk, and when I do ride him, it'll be once, twice a week at a walk, especially considering his hooves are a problem. So I'm doing a lot of talking here and not a lot of trimming, but he's handling it really well. So let me just come in here and kind of finish off this hoof right now. So when I finish off the hoof, it's about blending everything with the smooth side of the rasp. I don't want to leave any teeth marks on the hoof, and I'm just closing the hoof horn and intertubular horn at the edge of their growth, just to stop bacterial invasion. I'm just kind of making a cap there and smearing everything across. So he's good to go for another 4 weeks. I won't touch him for another 4 weeks. And he will be unbalanced again after 4 weeks because his body is the way it is. I can't get in there and change his body. I will be doing some in-hand work with him to get him to lift his thoracic sling and to work with his shoulder, because the shoulder has no bony attachments, it's only soft tissue there. So you can play with this, but there's 1 hour of training a day and 23 other hours in the day, and if he is not using his body on his own choice differently, 1 hour of training is not going to do much to affect the way he's using his hooves. So it is what it is, and it's something that you manage. Someone could put shoes on this horse and kind of mechanically force the symmetry, and that might be an option for someone else who wants to ride him more extensively. For a 19-year-old horse with his body form and his traumatic background and everything that he's gone through, why should I want him to be ridden extensively? He just needs to ride for his well-being if that's something he enjoys, but mostly just live out the term of his natural life with as much comfort and care as possible. That's my goal for him. And he's a tough little cookie, aren't you? You're a tough little cookie and you don't suffer no fool gladly, right? Oh. Okay, so I just did, how long was that? 5-6 minutes trim on the worst hoof. And he was a perfect citizen, which is great. So it is his worst hoof. You can't expect perfection, and it would be irresponsible malpractice to try and carve the hoof into correctness in 1 trim, 2 trim, 3 trim. Again, 19-year-old horse, years of unbalanced growth. I can't fix that in even a handful of trims. It's a year's process. So certainly I would like to invest in some boots for him. Very soft ones with big, thick insoles. That's what I'm looking for, just to support him where he were to start working. Not only is that going to lift his front end higher, but give his soles more protection and get him feeling his balance in a new way, just by giving him that soft squishiness to kind of explore his proprioception a little bit differently. So if you zoom in here, just kind of have a look at what I've done. I focused very much on the heels, trying to balance him from the heels. And then when it came to the toe, I focused more on the outer wall and less on the inner wall or the sole, because again, he's very thin-soled around his toes. And it's better. It's not perfect, but it's better. It's manageable. And we would just continue like this. Lateral cartilages feel good. Okay. Yeah, and we're going to continue with this for as long as we need to. I think his radiographs did show some small arthritic changes in one of the joints. So we've got that to contend with as well. And many people would tell me to just put this horse to sleep. But he's pretty comfortable and pretty happy. And he's useful to me. I mean, I'm educating you guys with him right now, and is that not a use? So not all horses have to be riding horses in order for them to be useful to us. That's my, again, professional, unprofessional opinion, and many people might disagree with me on that. But yeah, it is what it is, and now he's going to go back into the track system where he gets lots and lots of movement. He's just 1 month, no, less than 1 month, he's on organic meadow hay instead of straw. He's probably been on straw or oat straw his whole life, which would be contributing towards his distended belly. And he's getting some probiotics, so we're hoping that's going to kind of start bringing things together a little bit more. And the lovely lady who's behind the camera, she's going to get on him. She's a little bit lighter than me, so it's going to be a bit of a project for you too, Sanu.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
We'll see.
We'll see. But you're doing real good, man. All right.